The hall was made of living light, yet it felt colder than the void between stars. Every heartbeat inside it was amplified, reflected, dissected by the crystalline air of the Aurelian Conflux. Ambassador Rhea Vance stood at the center, her pulse the only human rhythm in a room that had forgotten what warmth meant. The assembly of 400 species waited in silence, not out of respect, but out of the fear that even their voices might fracture the fragile stillness hanging over them. Rhea had been summoned to answer for a sin she did not believe existed. They called it the harmonic breach, a violation of the ancient code that defined how wars should sound, how death should be sung. In the eyes of the Conflux, to fight without blood was to desecrate the sacred order of conflict itself. Yet she said nothing. She simply looked up at the chamber's spiraling light, where words of judgment shimmered like constellations, and wondered how many civilizations had mistaken cruelty for balance. High Conductor Zareth spoke first. His voice vibrated in harmonic waves that rippled through the chamber, the sound of a being born of resonance. To his kind, silence was the mark of corruption. Humanity, he declared, has employed methods that distort the natural cadence of war. Your neural dampeners erase the cry of combat. You kill the song before it begins. His tone was melodic, but the accusation beneath it struck like a blade. Around him, other delegates pulsed and shimmered in agreement. The Conflux adored performance. Every outrage was a symphony, every judgment a hymn. Rhea listened, her face a calm mask carved by exhaustion. They had no idea, she thought. They had never seen their cities burn so bright the air itself screamed. They had never watched oceans boil under the arrogance of their own weapons. These creatures had rules for destruction because they had never truly met it. She remembered the smell of old earth during the last human war, the air thick with metal and guilt. And she understood something the Conflux never could. When you've heard enough screams, silence becomes sacred. Zareth's light dimmed, waiting for her response. Ambassador Vance, he pressed, the Conflux demands an explanation. Do humans consider mercy an acceptable instrument of warfare? Rhea's eyes lifted to meet his. The chamber's luminescence refracted in her pupils, turning them into tiny mirrored galaxies. We consider mercy, she said softly, the only weapon worth mastering. The words rippled through the hall like gravity-bending light. The delegates shifted, their colors flickering in agitation. Mercy. To them it was a defect, a flaw in evolution, a sign of weakness so profound it bordered on heresy. The silence that followed was so complete it hurt. Rhea could feel their thoughts pressing against her mind. Questions, disbelief, revulsion. You misunderstand us, Zareth said, his voice trembling at a lower frequency now, almost human. To spare the enemy is to deny them the honor of struggle. You poison the essence of war, she smiled faintly, not out of defiance but pity. Perhaps the essence needed poisoning. Somewhere behind her, the light of the chamber flickered, as if reacting to the tension in her voice. The Conflux murmured in ultraviolet and infrared, exchanging disbelief like static. Rhea stayed still. Every instinct told her not to move, not to justify, not to plead. She was not here to win them over. She was here to bear witness, to let them see, the quiet conviction of a species that had already lost everything once and decided that mercy would be its rebellion against extinction. The High Conductor's voice finally broke the silence. Your kind has forgotten harmony, he said. You disrupt the balance between life and death. Rhea took a slow breath. The memory of her world's last war flickered again behind her eyes. The night the skies burned and the oceans turned black, the moment humanity realized it had no gods left to blame. No, she said. We remember it better than you ever could. The chamber fell still. Even light seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere, deep within the lattice of the Conflux, the ancient recorders etched her words into the archives of eternity. Rhea Vance, speaking for a race too gentle to be understood, too dangerous to be ignored. And as the silence grew heavier, a thought crossed her mind. Not fear, not defiance, but weary clarity. If the galaxy needed to learn what mercy truly meant, then mercy would have to speak louder than war, louder than war. The verdict came wrapped in ceremony. 1,000 luminous beings bowed their heads as High Conductor Zareth struck the resonance crystal with the tip of his staff. The note that rang out was flawless, cold, and final, the sound of judgment forged in arrogance. It pulsed through the chamber, through Rhea's chest, through every nerve that still remembered what fear once felt like. "Humanity stands accused," Zareth intoned, his voice reverberating in frequencies designed to sting the mind. "You have violated the Codex of Harmonic Conduct by deploying devices that silence aggression, stripping combatants of the will to fight. You have waged war without song, without death, without dignity. You have desecrated the sacred equilibrium of conflict itself." The assembly responded in waves of approval, radiant murmurs cascading like applause made of light. Rhea watched the spectacle, emotionless, the faintest twitch at the corner of her mouth, the only betrayal of thought. In their culture, to silence was a crime. In hers, it had become an act of mercy. Zareth gestured toward a hovering projection that bloomed to life before the delegates. Footage played, slow-motion images of alien soldiers collapsing mid-battle, weapons falling harmlessly from their grasp, faces frozen in tranquil disorientation. No blood, no screams, just the eerie serenity of violence denied. "Behold the result of human technology," Zareth declared. "The cognitive dampener, an abomination that turns warriors into statues of peace. They say it is temporary. They say no lives were taken. But what life remains in a mind forbidden to choose struggle?" The words were sharp, beautiful, rehearsed. Around the chamber, the other races pulsed in rhythm with his anger. The Virex Collective emitted a low, metallic hum, the sound of collective disgust. The Thalorians, spectral and translucent, flickered like candle flames in disapproval. Each species carried centuries of war traditions carved into their genes. To them, Rhea represented blasphemy incarnate, a creature who would rather heal than conquer. Rhea waited until the resonance faded. Then she spoke, softly enough that the translation matrices strained to catch her words. "We stopped the killing, temporarily. We gave you time to think. You used that time to accuse us." The stillness fractured. A ripple of outrage passed through the chamber. The delegates' bioluminescence flared like tempers turned to light. Zareth's glow sharpened into crimson. "You dare justify psychological mutilation?" Rhea's gaze lifted, steady as a loaded horizon. "I justify preservation. You worship the theater of destruction and call it honor. We saw what that worship did to us centuries ago. We decided survival was a holier thing." The hall trembled with overlapping frequencies: anger, disbelief, fear. The sound itself became physical, pressing against her skin like heat. Rhea closed her eyes and let it wash over her. Beneath the chaos of alien noise, she heard something familiar, the faint echo of her own past. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw Earth burning again, cities swallowing themselves in fire, soldiers screaming prayers to gods that had already stopped listening. She remembered standing among them, a child of smoke, learning that mercy was not weakness. It was rebellion against everything that had gone wrong. She opened her eyes, and the chamber's light dimmed to meet her calm. "We learned restraint the way all children of ruin do," she said, "by surviving our own extinction." A long silence followed. The delegates shifted uneasily, their shapes bending with the gravity of her words. The Thalorian envoy's light faltered first. Then the Virex dimmed. Even Zareth's harmonic field quivered. For a moment, no one could find the right frequency to speak. Then Zareth straightened, regaining his rhythm. "Your sentiment is irrelevant. The Conflux cannot permit such methods. Your species will be stripped of diplomatic status. Your colonies will be isolated until a formal review of your military ethics is complete." Rhea tilted her head, as if studying the sentence rather than receiving it. "You mean," she said quietly, "until you decide what punishment suits those who refuse to kill you properly." Zareth's glow flared white-hot. "You mock this assembly?" "No," she replied. "I grieve it." Her restraint unsettled them more than any outburst could have. To stand calm beneath collective condemnation required a kind of strength they didn't recognize. They only understood defiance through sound and violence, not through silence and grace. The resonance crystals struck again, sealing the verdict. By decree of the Aurelian Conflux, Zareth proclaimed, humanity is hereby exiled from the harmony of civilized species. Any vessel bearing the human mark will be treated as rogue. Rhea inclined her head in acknowledgement, her movements deliberate, controlled. Then you've made your choice, she said. You've declared war on mercy itself. The chamber erupted in sound, furious and discordant, but Rhea no longer heard them. Her thoughts had retreated inward, to the memory of a world that had already burned, and the knowledge of what it meant when humans stopped holding back. As she was escorted from the hall, the delegates continued to argue about the ethics of her kind, unaware that history had just shifted course. None of them noticed the flicker of sorrow that passed across her face. It wasn't fear for her species nor anger at the verdict. It was pity, pure and quiet, for the galaxy that had just demanded to see what humanity looked like without restraint. They expected her to beg, to argue, to crumble beneath the weight of exile. Instead, Ambassador Rhea Vance returned to the chamber 3 days later, uninvited, carrying something the Conflux could not ignore, a sphere of living metal, pulsing faintly in rhythm with her heartbeat. The guards hesitated to stop her. None of them could explain why. Perhaps it was the silence that walked beside her, the kind that seemed to erase even the memory of sound. She placed the sphere on the central dais, and its surface rippled open like a pupil expanding to light. Data poured upward in cascades of golden geometry, millions of voices, human and otherwise, overlapping in perfect synchronization. The delegates flinched, not from volume, but from precision. It was the sound of truth stripped bare. This, Rhea said, her voice steady as orbit, is the core archive of the human ethical command. Every weapon we have ever designed, every decision we have ever refused to make. You want to understand us? Start here! Zareth rose, his luminescence sharpened into accusation. You dare to taint this chamber with your propaganda? No, she said. With our restraint, the sphere responded to her tone. Holograms bloomed like galaxies in miniature, schematics of machines and bioweapons, each accompanied by a line of human handwriting and a single word, rejected. The delegates leaned forward despite themselves, curiosity warring with horror. The first projection showed the eclipse field, a planet-wide neural veil capable of shutting down all aggressive intent across an entire biosphere in 12 seconds. Deactivated, Rhea narrated. Too absolute. Free will compromised. Another projection. Cascade Mercy Virus, engineered to induce collective empathy by simulating the emotions of every life form it touched. Rejected. Emotional contamination unethical. The last one lingered. A quiet design called Oblivion Engine, a weapon that could unmake matter itself, converting energy back into the nothingness from which the universe was born. Its creator had marked the file in red. Never again. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even light seemed to pause, unwilling to move in the presence of such madness restrained by choice. Zareth's voice cracked through the stillness. You built these things? Yes, Rhea answered simply. And then we buried them. Because we could. The archivist, Kelnar, had been silent until then, his luminous form dim with disbelief. You created weapons that could unmake existence and called that restraint? Rhea turned to him, her expression unreadable. No, we called it education. Every invention was a lesson in what not to become. The Thalorian envoy, shimmering with unease, spoke next. You mean to tell us you had the power to end us all this time? Rhea's lips curved not into a smile, but into something far more dangerous, a look of understanding. You still think power is the point. The room trembled. The Conflux's ancient infrastructure seemed to pulse with an alien heartbeat as the realization rippled through them. The humans hadn't been holding back out of fear or inability. They had been holding back because they understood exactly what they were capable of. Zareth's resonance faltered. Why show us this? To threaten us? Rhea's gaze met his, unwavering. To warn you. You declared war on mercy. I'm giving you a chance to reconsider. Zareth's harmonic tone broke into static, the sound of disbelief fighting terror. You can't frighten us with morality. Morality isn't what you should fear, Rhea replied. It's what we learned to build around it. She reached out and touched the sphere. The holograms shifted again, this time revealing fragments of video, grainy archives from humanity's own history. Soldiers pulling enemies from rubble. Scientists dismantling superweapons they had spent lifetimes creating. Children standing in the ruins of war, promising never to repeat it. The images weren't triumphant. They were weary, heavy with the kind of sorrow that breeds wisdom. Zareth tried to speak, but no sound came. His resonance field flickered, overwhelmed by something his species had no word for. Shame. You see, Rhea said softly, you thought mercy was a weakness because you never had to earn it. We did. It cost us our innocence, our arrogance, our world. We learned restraint the hard way, and we offered that lesson freely. Her voice deepened, a tremor beneath the calm. But you called it unnatural. You called it wrong. The sphere pulsed once, then shut itself down, collapsing into a perfect silence that swallowed the chamber whole. For a long moment, no one moved. The Conflux, keepers of harmony, masters of resonance, stood in a silence so absolute, it felt like a judgment. Rhea looked around the room, her gaze sweeping over the alien faces. The flickering lights, the fragile certainties. You've mistaken mercy for inability, she said. You've mistaken silence for surrender. But we've been preparing for this conversation longer than your civilizations have existed. Kelnar's voice was barely a whisper. What happens now? Rhea turned toward the exit, the faintest glimmer of grief in her eyes. Now, she said, you see what happens when we stop being gentle. And as she walked away, the lights of the Conflux dimmed behind her, one by one, like stars retreating before the dawn. They waited for retaliation. Fleets mobilized, alliances hardened, war machines hummed to life across the void. But humanity did not strike. They vanished. Every human envoy, every vessel, every signal, gone as if erased from the frequencies of existence. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy experienced true silence. At first, the Conflux celebrated. The threat has withdrawn, Zareth declared before the trembling council, his resonance restored to its proud clarity. Their absence is proof of guilt and defeat. Yet even as he spoke, his harmonic tones faltered. The lights around him dimmed a fraction slower than before, as though the chamber itself no longer obeyed perfectly. The first failures were subtle. The supply nodes on the Thalorian moons stopped transmitting nutrient shipments. The Virex fleets reported minor computational errors, nothing alarming until their targeting systems began locking onto empty space. The Oranthe choir worlds found their great resonant engines suddenly silent. The frequencies that powered their communication lattices no longer harmonized. No one connected the pattern at first. Kelnar did. Watching from the archives, he noticed the timing. Every failure was tied to a system touched by human engineering. And that, he realized with a hollow chill, meant every world. For centuries, humanity had been the quiet architects beneath civilization's symphony, repairing networks, optimizing trade, healing atmospheres poisoned by arrogance. No one had noticed because humans never asked for credit. They just worked. And now, their work had stopped. By the end of the first week, trade routes collapsed. By the second, hospitals darkened. By the third, planetary defense systems failed to respond to their own governments. The galaxy, once vibrant with sound and light, began to drown in the silence humanity had left behind. Zareth's broadcasts grew frantic. His voice, once a pillar of harmonic authority, now cracked across the channels. "We must restore the balance," he cried. "Summon the human engineers! Reopen negotiations." But every attempt met the same response, an automated transmission in a human voice, calm and polite. "Humanity is not available at this time. Please resolve your internal conflicts before requesting external assistance." It was not defiance. It was instruction. Kelnar watched entire systems unravel under the weight of their dependence. The Virex fleets, deprived of human-optimized algorithms, began firing upon their own shadows. The Oranthe capital, unable to regulate its sound fields, imploded in a wave of destructive resonance. The Thalorians turned on themselves in desperate hunger as their biosynthesis plants failed. Everywhere, leaders called it divine punishment. Kelnar called it revelation. He documented the unraveling in long, trembling reports. "They did not attack us," he wrote. "They simply stepped away, and the universe remembered its own fragility." Days turned to months. The once proud empires of the Conflux became scavengers of their own ruins. Planets that had sung for millennia now whispered in static. And amid the wreckage, the truth spread like infection. Humanity had never been weak. They had been foundational. They were the silent gravity that held order together. Kelnar found Zareth in the remnants of the conductor's hall, his luminescence dimmed to a fading ember. "You should have listened," Kelnar said quietly. Zareth's voice cracked. "We thought them naive. We mistook their gentleness for fear." "They warned us," Kelnar replied. Mercy was never weakness. It was power disguised as forgiveness. Outside, ships burned in orbital decay, falling like comets through the skies of dead worlds. The glow lit Zareth's face, reflecting his defeat. "Do you think they'll come back?" he asked. Kelnar didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the void where Earth's light used to shimmer among the stars. "Not until we understand what they tried to teach us." Weeks later, the last surviving relay broadcast one final image. A single line of human script etched into a dying console, pulsing faintly in the dark. "We warned you to leave us be. Now you understand the silence, and in that silence the galaxy learned its cruelest lesson, that when humanity withdrew its mercy, it didn't bring war. It brought absence. And absence, they discovered, was far more devastating. When the silence finally broke, it wasn't with the thunder of engines or the glare of weapons fire. It began as a whisper across dead frequencies. One word, spoken in a dozen languages, and yet unmistakably human. Enough. Every surviving comm array in Conflux space received it simultaneously. No coordinates, no commands, just the word, carrying a gravity that bent thought itself. By then, most worlds had become ghostly echoes of their former selves. The once golden harmony of the Oranthi was a dirge now. The Thalorians lived in dim bioluminescent caves. Their radiance faded to mourning. Even the Virex Collective, those proud machinists of logic, now ran their circuits in loops of regret. When the message came, every being looked to the void as if waiting for judgment. The judgment came gently. A human vessel appeared over the ruins of the Conflux capital. Not a warship, too small, too quiet, but surrounded by a halo of unlit drones that moved like thoughts. Its hull bore no markings, no banners, only a single pulse of white light that matched the rhythm of a human heartbeat. Zareth, what remained of him, rose to meet it. His form flickered and faltered, but pride still gave him shape. The last high conductor of a fallen harmony drifted into orbit aboard a battered courier, his voice little more than a ghost of resonance. When the human transmission opened, it was her voice he heard. "Hello, Zareth." Rhea Vance looked older, though the stars outside her viewport hadn't changed. There were lines on her face that weren't there before, creases carved by pity more than time. Behind her, the faint hum of human systems filled the silence with a sound that almost resembled peace. He bowed his head, light dimming in shame. "We surrender. I know," she said softly. "That's why we came." He hesitated, searching for words that could fit the scale of his failure. "Why didn't you destroy us?" "You could have. Long ago." Rhea's eyes lingered on the broken curve of his world below, where entire cities had gone dark. "Because we already did," she said. "Not your bodies. Your certainty," he flinched. "You think this mercy?" "I think this truth," she replied. "Every empire learns it in time. Power without empathy devours itself. You just learned faster because we stopped feeding your illusion." She transmitted a document then, a treaty, though not of surrender. Its language was calm, precise, and unbearably human, mandatory ethical governance, shared reconstruction protocols, education in conflict mediation, human oversight for all interspecies operations. The terms were not cruel, only absolute. Zareth's flickering eyes traced the text, his glow trembling. "You mean to rule us?" No, Rhea said. To remind you what rule costs. Outside, hundreds of human ships emerged from the void, silent and unarmed, descending not as conquerors but as caretakers. Automated drones began rebuilding infrastructure, recalibrating atmospheric stabilizers, restoring power to hospitals. Everywhere they landed, systems revived. The galaxy breathed again. But every pulse of new light carried the unmistakable watermark of human design. Rhea watched through the viewport as the Aranthi capital reignited. Its resonance restored but softened, as though the world itself had learned to speak more quietly. We'll help you rebuild, she said. But this time you'll see us doing it. You'll remember who kept you alive. Zareth looked at her, the remnants of pride flickering like dying starlight. And if we failed to learn? Her answer was calm, almost sorrowful. Then we maintain the silence. The transmission ended. Weeks later, a monument rose from the ashes of the Conflux's Great Hall, built by both human and alien hands. It reached into the sky like a wound made whole, its surface etched in every known language. Mercy is not weakness. Restraint is not cowardice. We offered peace. You demanded war. You survived only because we allowed it. Beneath the main inscription, a single line of faintly luminescent text shimmered whenever the sun hit it just right. We are still choosing mercy. Kelnar recorded the dedication, his tone quiet, reverent. They came as saviors, yet carried themselves like mourners, he whispered into his chronicle. Perhaps they grieve what we forced them to become. That night, the sky above the Conflux shone brighter than it had in years. Human ships floated there like patient stars, keeping watch, not for enemies, but for understanding. Zareth stood beneath the monument and asked the question that would echo across generations. Will humanity ever trust us again? No one answered, but high above, one of the human ships flickered its beacon twice. Acknowledgement, not forgiveness. Rhea's voice came faintly through the open channel, soft as twilight. Trust is earned in silence, Zareth. The same way mercy is. And then the transmission faded, leaving only the steady hum of restored power and the quiet knowledge that peace, when forged by those who understand war, is the most fearsome weapon of all.